I am honored and privileged to introduce you to Juan Fernandez this afternoon. Juan has, in the last months, been come into the Credit Union Association of New Mexico as the new CEO. Prior to that, he spent a number of years also in the association serving as governmental affairs VP and also headed up a consulting arm with the association. And he's going to share with us perspectives on sustainable, equitable economic democracy through the eyes of the credit unions and perhaps some of his vision for what's coming ahead. Juan, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. It's been a while since I saw many of you in person. And of course, I spent some time in the state of Washington during the pandemic. So it's been wonderful to come back to New Mexico and lead the Credit Union Association. In fact, I'm also very happy to see so many cooperative leaders from our cooperative sector here joining us. I'm going to start out this conversation. I know I have a brief period of time, so I'm going to breeze through a quick presentation because I wanted to give all of you a little background regarding what the credit union movement is all about and kind of what our roots were. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the future and what we're kind of working on to kind of loop it all together. So let me go ahead and share my screen here really quick. So one of the main things that we're really focusing on at the Credit Union Association here in New Mexico is how we can have, lead with relevance, purpose, and impact. So let's look back a little bit regard to the roots of our movement. So credit unions, what you may or may not know is that we were born out of the Great Depression. As we all know in this call, that was a time of extreme poverty in the United States. More than 20% of Americans were unemployed, and were unemployed for a long period of time. And there was a severe access to capital. And that right there is the main reason why credit unions were formed, because the rich folks had access to banking, but the working men and women and families did not. They did not have access to that capital. And in fact, redlining was extremely prevalent before it was actually called redlining. The banks would place branches in neighborhoods where working people lived, but they didn't do loans in those areas. They would only take deposits in those areas. And of course, what happened during the Great Depression is that more than 11,000 banks failed. So as you could imagine, that made matters even worse for working families because their money was gone. Their money was evaporated. There was not the widespread access to insurance that there is today. So it was a really, really awful time for working families throughout this country. And I think that's what makes the Great Depression even worse than many other economic contractions we've had since then. And what banks did is that they doubled down. They closed their doors even more to the average worker and the average family. So it was just a really awful time for working families. So credit unions were part of the New Deal for America. In 1934, FDR signed the Federal Credit Union Act, and what that led to a great explosion in the number of credit unions throughout the country. In 1929, there were 1,100 credit unions. By the end of the 30s, there were over 8,000 credit unions in the country, and that growth continued through the 40s, which once again showed that the credit unions really were counter-cyclical. They actually did very well during a time where banks were actually closing their doors. So I want to mention very quickly this woman here, because during the 1930s, Louise Herring is her name. She's what many people call the mother of credit unions. She was a single mother in the 30s, where at a time when many women didn't really work. She was very upset. She worked for Kroger. She was one of the administrative executive assistants, and she was sent to this summit to create what became the Credit Union National Association. She was very upset for what she saw, which was that there were these bucket shops that were preying on Kroger employees. And what they would do is they would lend money, since banks were not lending to the worker, to working families. These bucket shops would, and they would charge crazy fees and interest to those employees. And that's what led her to become basically what many people refer to her as the mother of credit unions. And she said, you know, it's not about money, not about accumulating capital. It's about helping people's lives be better. The purpose of the credit union is to reform the financial system so that everyone can have, and of course, in 30s language, his place in the sun, of course, their place in the sun. And she went on to form and organize over 500 credit unions throughout her life. That's how passionate she was about that. And the reason I'm telling you these stories is because, of course, here we are again at another financial crises, another time when people are really uncertain about their financial situation. And of course, the credit union difference, we're not for profit, we're member owned, we're financial cooperatives, we're locally owned and operated, and we have volunteer boards of directors. And of course, that means that we keep a lot of capital here in New Mexico. As you can see, if you add up the numbers, every single year we save about $100 million, either in extra interest that people earn in their savings or in lower interest rates on their loans. And just like in the 30s, even today, credit unions are counter-cyclical. Because credit unions don't prey on folks, in whether it was the 2008 crisis or the current crisis, credit unions have actually grown and done better because they have been seen as a refuge for working families. So kind of bringing it all back together on this brief summary of kind of our history, we were born out of the Great Depression, we were part of the New Deal, and there are some significant differences between credit unions, financial cooperatives, and other financial institutions that are for profit. And most importantly, regular people can join. And credit unions treat everyone the same way, no matter how much they have in their savings accounts. So the reason I kind of wanted to kind of loop all that together is because I want to kind of have that as the basis as to what we're working on into the future. So I came back to New Mexico and took this job because I really wanted to do things a little differently. I wanted to capitalize on that credit union difference, on that cooperative nature and structure that credit unions have for economic development here in New Mexico. So we are really doubling down on our advocacy efforts. I think even though we're in a time of health and financial crisis, it's also a time of opportunity. And the Congresswoman did a great job enumerating some of the things that Congress has recently passed that are coming to New Mexico. So I think we need to be really well prepared to take advantage of those programs and deploy them in the communities that need them. So right now, there is going to be funding coming to New Mexico, and we need to be ready and create the mechanism so that we can infuse that capital in the communities that need them most. And right now, I think the folks on this call, I'm so glad that we're doing the symposium, because we need to start creating those strategic partnerships so that we can support government and create the public-private nonprofit partnerships that we need to have in order to get those funds out the door. I just literally got back from DC last night, and I do think there is some concern that in New Mexico, we haven't been as quickly getting out the dollars to the communities that need them as we should be. And I think we all need to really think about that and see how we can do better and how we can all work and support the state in that. Small dollar loans right now for probably, I think in the next year, there's going to be a strong conversation about how we can make sure that lending is fair in New Mexico. And I'm very happy that credit unions have been at the forefront of that conversation about how we can have some limitations as to what kind of interest rates are charged to New Mexicans. And we are busy working hard on devising and creating new opportunities and new types of loan products so that we can continue delivering lending access that's fair and fairly priced to working families. And once again, I think that's an area where we can all come together. Housing affordability, that is something that's near and dear to my heart. I think we need to think differently, and I think we need to think outside the box and create those non-for-profit cooperative sector and credit union partnerships along with government to deliver on that. I've had many conversations with many of you on this call about how we can think outside the box, how we can potentially look at purchasing some of the homes that are in need of repairs in New Mexico and create the cooperatives to support fixing those homes and keeping them in a cooperative structure so that we can keep them affordable for working families. Because I am personally, and I know credit unions are very concerned over the rising cost of housing. And if you can't afford homes, that leads to greater societal problems like homelessness and people having to choose between paying their mortgage and putting food on the table. And that's not a choice that any of us want to have or want for anyone. So once again, I think we have an opportunity to think big and see how we can leverage some government dollars to deliver on some of these things. Sustainability, the representative talked about the funding and the infrastructure legislation that's going to be targeting sustainability and green energy. And I think we have an opportunity once again to come together, think outside the box, and create the innovation, the innovative products and services that we can, so that we can truly unleash capital and help not just people that benefit from tax breaks when it comes to putting solar panels and changing their vehicles to green energy, but also working families. That's a big priority of mine, because at the end of the day, when we look at who gets mostly affected by climate change, it's communities of color and communities that are poor. So credit unions are going to be leading in that area. And once again, I'm hoping to partner with many of you on this call. And lastly, I think we have just an amazing underutilized opportunity here in New Mexico to create a more inclusive and cooperative economy. I always like to think that credit unions and other cooperatives, we're the third way. We're not government taking care of issues. We're not rich people taking care of issues. We're us. We are New Mexicans coming together to own the means of production and deliver a fair and fairly priced service to all of us, to each other, to provide services to our neighbors. And I think we have a really awesome opportunity to deliver on that promise to continue creating a more inclusive and cooperative economy. So with that, I will close by saying that I think while yes, there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of crises and needs in our communities, I think that just means we have an awesome opportunity to come together and work with each other to leverage some of the opportunities and some of the dollars that are coming from Washington, D.C. to ensure that not just the well-to-do are benefiting, but everyone is. So with that, thank you, everyone. I mean, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.
Thank you, Juan.